I'm Jason Palmer, and I'm part of the Building Stock Lab. Air conditioning. Sounds harmless enough, but it could be the biggest threat to reducing energy consumption in buildings over the next 40 years. My big idea is to introduce a legal hierarchy for cooling buildings. You don't need me to tell you that climate change is here. Peak summer temperatures all around the world are climbing. In the UK, the chart on the left shows average summer temperatures, that's the temperature between June and August, have risen from 1880, the mean summer temperature was 13.5 degrees C, that's risen 1.5 degrees C to 2020. That's the black dotted line shows the rolling 10-year average. Chart on the right here looks desperately dull. Actually, it's gripping and petrifying. What this chart shows is hot weather records that were set across the UK's 150 weather stations. And what you can see is that the first 7 decades of the last century, there were almost no record-breaking hot temperatures, whereas 1976, there were 8. Jump to 2022, the very hot year you probably remember, lots of heat waves, almost 60 of these hot weather records. This is desperately concerning. Arguably even worse, the Hadley Centre and the Met Office's latest climate change projections, UKCP 18, indicate this will accelerate over time. So not just 1.5 degrees C temperature increase, but if you look at the Met Office's low emissions scenario, and this is the scenario that assumes most of the countries of the world will reduce their greenhouse gas emissions close to zero over the next few decades. Pretty optimistic assumption, pretty unlikely to happen. If you look at that RCP 2.6, it shows their central estimate, that's the 50% probability, will have pretty much all of England and most of Wales increasing in temperature between 3 and 4 degrees C. That's 2 or maybe 3 times the temperature increase we've seen over the last 150 years. And that's the low emissions scenario. If we turn to the high emissions scenario, these 3 charts at the bottom here, the central estimate shows that all of southern England and a chunk of Wales will increase in temperature between 5 and 6 degrees C. That's their central 50% estimate. The maximum, their 10%, there's a 10% chance that temperatures in southern England, including London, will be more than 8 degrees C. What this means for heat waves, defined here as a period of more than 2 days at above 30 degrees C, is that under the high emission scenario, heat waves will increase from currently 1 heat wave every 4 years up to 4 heat waves every single year. That's a 16-fold increase. This is the thing we really need to be concerned about. What happens in a heat wave? Well, lots of people go out and they buy air conditioning systems, and they're not getting the very efficient, properly professionally installed air conditioning systems. What typically they're getting are these kind of portable air conditioning systems. It's very cheap, very easy to install. And the reason this is happening is because adaptation plans at the level of buildings, neighbourhoods, settlements, and actually nationwide are woefully immature. What do we do about this? Well, what I propose is that we extend our building regulations in the UK to introduce a mandatory hierarchy. 3 steps, where step 1 is installing zero energy or passive measures. I'm thinking here about shading and secure night cooling, which is night cooling that allows you to ventilate a property overnight with no risk of burglaries, no fear of entry. This should be the go-to measure when people are feeling too hot at the end of a heat wave, when they need to do something. Step 2 should be personal cooling devices which cool people, not buildings. I'm thinking here about cooling hats, yes, cooling jackets, cooling chairs, cooling sheets and fans. All of these things are already widely available. Hotter countries than the UK sell these in large quantities. and small evaporative coolers. These are small plug-in devices with a small amount of water. They just have fans to evaporate the water. It brings down the temperature of a single room. Very low cost, very low energy consumption. They don't even use a lot of water. And only step 3, only after you've carried out steps 1 and 2, should you be able to install active mechanical cooling, air conditioning. And even then, it should be not the portable air conditioning devices I showed before, but professionally installed air conditioning with minimum defined efficiencies. Now, I think there should be an exemption. So all this should apply to the vast majority of homes and businesses, but there should be an exemption for buildings that can show in advance they're going to generate the electricity they need for their air conditioning systems entirely from PV. The concern here is about increasing energy consumption. If you're getting the juice from PV, it doesn't matter if you're using for air conditioning. And I think what we need is something a bit like a licensing regime. So we have online approval of building control submissions, whereby you have to show evidence that you've already carried out steps 1 and steps 2, showing receipts, invoices, photos, that you've done these things first, and you're not allowed to progress to step 3 until you can prove those things. The vast majority of situations, people won't actually need step 3. They'll find that they're comfortable at low temperatures. Alongside this step up in the building regulations, we also need safeguards, particularly for the elderly and for people with underlying health conditions who are very vulnerable in hot temperatures. And I think those people should be allowed the plug-in portable air conditioning systems. I think there should be restrictions on those plug-in portable air conditioning systems in the same way there are now for fan electric heaters. So in the UK, you can't buy large electric fan heaters as you could in the past. And I think we need something similar on cooling. We also need safeguards for people in rented accommodation who haven't got the same opportunities to install shading as is the case for owner-occupiers. And there I think we need an extension of the MEES, the Minimum Energy Efficiency Standards, which will cover cooling, and it will encourage landlords to install both shading devices and night cooling. I'm not going to go through in detail what the building regulations currently say, but it's really shocking that there are very tight controls over installing heating in existing homes. So conservatories, for example, it's really difficult to extend your heating system and put radiators into a conservatory for good reason, because there's high heat loss in conservatories. Whereas, if you want to put a portable air conditioning system in your conservatory, which is at least as vulnerable to overheating in summer as it is, quotes, underheating in winter, there are no controls. You just go out and you buy one of these things. We ought to do something about this incredible imbalance between heating and cooling in the building regs. When it comes to an individual making a purchase decision to buy cooling equipment or something that addresses high temperatures in their workplaces or in their homes, there's no comparison between the certainty of a thermostat and a reassuring whir of your air conditioning system when you flick a switch by comparison to an awning or a shading device outside. And there's some psychology here. And my view is that actually it's not that an awning is intangible. You can go out and touch and feel an awning, but it's that when you've got a device that tells you it's going to achieve 24 degrees or wherever you set the thermostat setting, that feedback is extremely reassuring, gives you much more confidence in what's happening. The costs send a similar message, actually a strong incentive to go for these low efficiency portable air conditioning systems, and a huge imbalance between the costs of cooling using shading compared to using active air conditioning systems. So the point is, we should be using passive measures first. Only then, after we've done the passive measures, should we be considering the other measures. And if you do that, the passive measures you need A, a shorter cooling season, B, even during the cooling season, so not 4 months, but maybe 2 or 3 months of cooling, you'll probably need cooling on fewer days. On the days you do need cooling, it'll be fewer hours. And then point C here, even in those smaller number of hours when you do need cooling, your air conditioning system won't be having to work so hard, so consequently it'll run more efficiently. To wrap up then, we focused in the UK building regs for too long on regulating heating. We haven't really thought properly about regulating cooling, certainly not in existing buildings. We've done some work in Part O on new buildings, almost nothing on existing buildings. This is a serious oversight, and we need to fix it before it's too late.